Hey everybody, JC here. Happy Thursday afternoon. It's about 4 o'clock here in Porter, Texas. About to go drive out to the Woodlands and see my brother-in-law at his rehab facility. See how he's doing, drop off some clean clothes and take some dirty ones. I've already got it into the navigation, so all I've got to do is press the little blue button and we'll be on our way. Let's go. There we go. Coming out of my driveway, make a right turn, go a little slow. Got my niece's Camry, got the neighbor's Audi, my brother-in-law's GMC Sierra, young lady to the left, couple of cars on both sides, and we navigate that perfectly. Little slow, but we navigate it well. Definitely prefer to go a little bit slower in that scenario right there. I'm absolutely fine with that. Beautiful day here in the greater Houston metro area. It is 84 degrees, little bit cloudy, partly cloudy, but the sun is definitely out. I would say it's about 50 to 60% cloudy today, but not too bad. So yes, we are headed to the Woodlands to go see my brother-in-law at his rehab facility. He just got out of surgery. So he had his surgery 9 days ago, Tuesday last week. We got him over to the rehab facility a couple of days after that. He had back surgery, and it was a pretty hardcore back surgery. And so, yeah, I went and picked him up at the hospital on Thursday of last week and took him up to the Woodlands and got him checked in and admitted to the rehab facility up there, which is essentially a place where if people have had strokes, heart attacks, brain aneurysm, anything that would take away the use of a good portion of your body, and you need to be able to rehabilitate. So it's, when I say physical therapy rehab, I'm not talking about like sports medicine, like, you know, taking you to the next level on your layups and you know, full court press. None of that. This is like really extensive, intensive, dire stuff where somebody's had a stroke and they've lost, you know, the use of maybe half of their body, and facilities like this will help those folks try to rehab as much as they possibly can, get as much of their bodily functions back and working. So that's where my brother-in-law is at right now. Like I said, I dropped him off there Thursday of last week, and then I went out there Sunday to check on him, take some more clothes to him and a few other things. He was doing good. He still, when I saw him on Sunday, he was not able to stand on his own or stand at all, put any weight on his body whatsoever, on his legs. So he was in a wheelchair. He was able to, you know, with nurses' help and my help, he could get from his bed to the wheelchair and back and forth again. But he was pretty much confined to, it's like my front camera went out there for a second. Apologies, folks. I'll get that back going here in a second. But yeah, he was confined to his wheelchair or his bed, and that was it. Let's see, is that, I don't think that's going, so I'm gonna have to wait till we get up to a stop sign, and looks like the camera my front camera went out there for a second, so apologies, folks. Better the front one than the middle one. Seems like the front one's the one that goes out when it wants to go out. And probably not a mistake that it's the one looking at me. So apologies about that. But yeah, once I get a chance at a stop sign where we're there long enough, or a stoplight, I will take a look at the front, the driver and passenger facing camera, and see if I can get that turned back on. It looks like the camera's back on, but it's not recording. So again, I don't want to trigger the in-cabin camera. Let's see if we come to a complete stop here. Oh, we do, but we're going to keep moving up here in a second. Maybe when we get behind this Kia. We have enough room to get behind the Kia? No, we don't yet. We will here in a second, though. There we go. So let's see if I've got some time here while we're moving. But I do want to be cognizant since we're at the railroad intersection. So just give me a second here. That's an interesting bike setup there. Let me at least get this. Let's see. I think that got it. We'll see. We'll see how long that works. Let me see. Yeah, it looks like it's recorded. It went off again. We'll try this again in a second. Well, that's interesting. Oh my gosh. I'm just going to have to turn that off for a second. Oh, well, let me see. And we're going to be here for a while anyway. I'm going to leave that off for a second. In fact, I'm going to turn that off and let it cool down. That may be what it is. Sorry, folks. Got a little overheated. All right, let's see how we do here at this intersection. We do have traffic coming. We've got oncoming traffic from both sides. We've got a vehicle. We've got another oncoming vehicle. And we've got one more. And again, and we've got one from that side. And we got another one from this side. Yeah, this is a tough intersection without having lights. All right, they're turning, but then we've got more oncoming vehicles coming. And this will give my front camera a little bit of time to cool down. I apologize about that. You can see this is a rough intersection. All right, looks like, there we go. I was about to say, we got a gap. We take it. Great job. Yeah, that one was interesting because we actually did have a vehicle to our right that was about 100 yards away. We identified a gap and we took it. And I'm going to be honest with you folks, I was a bit surprised that it was confident enough to take that one. Not that it was dangerous whatsoever. I mean, like I said, they were a good 100 yards away. I'm just not sure I've seen version 13 be as confident at that intersection as it was right there. So it's interesting. It was very confident with the vehicle coming from our right that was just continuing to go straight down 494, right, with no blinkers on. But at the same time, about 30 seconds prior, there was a vehicle coming down the other direction to our left on 494 that had its blinker on, that it was showing it was going to turn to its right over the railroad tracks. And we could have probably taken that because they had their blinker on. and we didn't. So again, showing that Tesla FSD version 13, at least the current release, does not trust human drivers and their blinkers yet. Just doesn't trust them. But it trusts itself in identifying a gap amongst human drivers very well, like very, very confident. So just an interesting juxtaposition there. All right, here we go. Got a gap right here, and it wants to, we need to get up on 59 East Tex Free. Can we get over? All right, we're over one. We need to get over one more. Excellent job. Excellent. We did it that time. We weren't able to make it last Sunday. All right, once we get into, let's see here. Yeah, it's gonna, let's see if I can turn that on. All right, I got to turn back on. One of the things I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put that on 30. Okay, now, let's see. Hopefully that let it cool down a bit. All right. Now we are firmly on 59 East Tex Freeway going northbound. We're going to be here for a couple of miles, and then we'll get on Highway 99 and go west, and we'll probably be, depending on whether it takes us all the way to 45 or we get off on, say, 13, 14. I'm not sure which one, but we'll be on there for a little while. All right. We got about 1.5 miles, and we're going to need to make it over 4 or 5 lanes, I believe. Got about 1.25 miles, has not started making its move yet. I have seen it be able to make exits across 4 or 5 lanes in literally 1/2 mile. So I'm not too concerned. I've only missed an exit one time. All right, there we go. 3/4 mile, and it started making its move. Yeah, I've only seen it miss an exit once while I've been on version 13. And in fact, that was last Saturday going to my nephew's engagement tea party. Or tea ceremony, I should say, not tea party. Careful there. Tea ceremony. All right. We're going to get on the on-ramp here for Highway 99. And there we go. Awesome. Now we should be on Highway 99 for a while. So, last time we did a Tesla FSD drive, I was able to continue some of my discussion related to Tesla's Optimus humanoid robot. And I promised you, I still had a little bit more I wanted to say about it. And I wanted to finish that out before we move on to other subjects. And it's interesting. I'm happy that I waited a day or so. So when was that? I think that was on Tuesday evening that I did that drive, and got that uploaded yesterday, I believe, or maybe I'm sorry, was that? Yeah, it was a couple of days ago. And I'm really happy that I had until now to do it, because we had a very, very interesting and significant event take place today. So Tesla now has on their open job listings, as of this morning, they need 70 new employees to quote unquote help them in the manufacturing of Tesla bots, which is the Optimus humanoid robot. So it's starting, folks. And in fact, I may need to walk back a couple of my comments before I want to say, whoa, this truck, you see that? They veered over here. I don't know why that truck veered over like that. They're probably on their phone. I don't know if you saw that, but that GMC Canyon right there came over into our lane. We adjusted to it well. Not sure why they came over into our lane. They're probably on their phone, but we're fine. So anyway, getting back to Optimus humanoid robots. Yeah, Tesla just put out job listings for 70, not 7, not 10, not 20, not 30, not 40, not 50, not 60, 70 job openings to start as soon as possible building Tesla Optimus humanoid robots. Most of these positions are going to be in their Fremont, California location, which totally makes sense for a couple of different reasons. Number one, the vast majority of their AI group and their Tesla bot group are in, Palo Alto and that Tesla Fremont area. And just so you know, the very first car manufacturing facility that Tesla ever had, and they still have, it's still going, is their Tesla Fremont factory. Used to be an old GM factory that GM gave up on decades ago. And Tesla got a really good deal on it. Oh, looks like, so we are getting off on 1314. Here we go. Put a pin in that here for a second. We were talking about folks working on the humanoid robot in Fremont, California. Let's go. Well, it'll probably be a little bit here before I get up to the intersection. But, yeah, we put on our right blinker. There we go. Looks like, well, no, we should not get in that, because that is it looks to me like that lane right there goes only into that work area. So we're good. So yeah, Tesla Fremont, the Fremont factory was their very first one. They bought it off of, it was an old GM factory. And so when Tesla first started mass manufacturing Teslas, the Roadster and the Model S, 10, 15 years ago. Well, in fact, the Model S came out in 2012, and and granted, they didn't have a lot of Roadsters, but what they did, so that was probably about 2010-ish. So yeah, about 15 years ago, a little over 15 years ago. And that was their very first factory. And so obviously since then, they've got several other gigafactories. They've got, so that's not called a gigafactory because it's not very big. And obviously, it had to be refurbished and everything. But you got Fremont, California. You got Austin, Texas. That's a big gigafactory. You got Berlin, in Germany. That's a big one. Shanghai. And then technically, I think they consider the place up in Buffalo to be a gigafactory as well. Although I think that one is dedicated mostly towards batteries and like non-car assembly type stuff. But nonetheless, gigafactory there. And so, as you can imagine, there'll be a handful of others that they'll bring online here pretty soon. Yeah, so that's it. That is interesting. I brought that part up too. So not only was there an announcement today that there's job openings now for 70 open positions to help build Optimus humanoid robots, but they also announced a couple of days ago that they're going to have a new battery facility in Shanghai, China. All right, let me put a pin in all that. Let me pay attention here. There we go. We got a gap. We got to go though. We got to go. Excellent job. Excellent job. We took that gap And I would say the speed on that was good. We didn't dilly-dally. I like that. So that was the second time that version 13 took a gap that no way on God's green earth would it have taken that gap on version 12 or definitely not version 11. But extreme confidence, and when it got out there in that gap, it got going. I like that. All right, we're getting over to the left. I'm gonna get a little drink here with my monster, my white monster. Excuse me while I grab my white monster. Right. So yeah, that's huge news. A lot of great news coming out of Tesla right now as it relates to humanoid robotics. So I said I was going to need to maybe rethink some of my statements. So if y'all remember, I informed you that on the earnings call, Tesla and Elon said that they're looking to manufacture 10,000 of the humanoid robots by the end of this year. And I was I think that's suspect. I mean, they're definitely going to get some out there, but I would expect to be more in that 3,000 to 5,000 range. But I'm going to tell you what else I didn't expect. That in early February, literally a week after they do the earnings call, we had it. That one, I'm going to tell you the truth. That was a long yellow, but we had it. I was kind of, all right, are our back tires going to be on that white line before that turns red? And not only was it, but it was completely yellow while we went under. That's interesting. That was a longer yellow than I'm used to. I think we got about an extra second or two on that one. Interesting. Maybe the yellows out here on these country roads are just a little bit longer. But, so yeah, some great news coming up. So I said 3 to 5, but I also didn't expect there to be, looking for people to fill jobs this quickly. And believe me, in the Tesla world, take my word on this. If they put out job up, number one, for each one of those 70, they're going to get 10,000 applicants. I mean, it just going to work for Tesla for an engineer, whether it's AI or mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, it's the equivalent of going to MIT or Harvard. It looks that good on your resume. So they're going to get like 10,000 plus resumes for each one of those openings. And the other thing I can guarantee you is Tesla will get those identified quickly. They will get those openings filled quickly, and they will get those people to work quickly. Tesla is not a place where people are allowed to sit there and dilly-dally and twiddle their thumbs. So I say all that to say, if on February 6th they put out job openings, they may be starting manufacturing here in a month. I mean, they're that quick. So it's got me thinking that, well, maybe I thought, that Elon was doing kind of one of those moonshot things on this is how many we're going to have by the end of the year. Now with that announcement, I'm like, I don't know. Maybe they will have 10,000. Maybe they'll have more. I mean, if they get going by March or April, like if they're able to start manufacturing in the second calendar quarter of this year, I mean, you're basically saying, do you think that they can manufacture 2,500 to 3,000 of something every quarter? Well, of course they can, right? They manufacture 500,000 cars a quarter right now. And there's less metal bending, if you will, on an Optimus robot than there is a vehicle. Now, that being said, the Optimus robot's obviously a lot more complex in the metal bending than a Tesla vehicle, but still, it's a lot less metal to bend. So that's where we're at today, and so I wanted to just go ahead and take the opportunity to finish out, some of my thoughts on the humanoid robot. And one thing that came to mind as I was getting my thoughts together on it, and to finish this out on the robotics, is, and I promise you, I'm finishing it out. Once we go down this, we'll be done, and we'll move on to other things, unless something new comes up with robotics. But there was a article that came out, gosh, it may have even been a year ago now, but it's by a man named Tony Seba. And Tony is a world-renowned futurist. He's brilliant. He's been right on so many things before. I mean, he's been right on EVs and where we got to with worldwide EV adoption. He's been right on, solar and wind power generation and all that. And so I say that to say that when Tony speaks, people listen, because he's generally right. I mean, at first it shocks the ear when you hear things that he says, because some of the stuff he said 20, 25 years ago was shocking to people's ears about EVs and about electricity generation and electricity storage and where it would happen and where the cost curves would go. And they thought he was crazy. And you know what? Tony would tell you, if he could go back to himself in the year 2000, he would tell his 2000 self, stop sandbagging. So, okay, interesting. We're going to take a left here on Highway 242. Good to go. So we get in the left dedicated lane. But I say that about a year ago, Tony came out with an article. Maybe it wasn't a year ago, maybe 9 months ago or so. But Tony, along with a guy named Adam Dorr, who's really good as well. I've seen him on some podcasts, as well as a guy named Brad Libby. They penned an article. And, let me know once I go through this if y'all want me to identify the specific article for you. But I just thought it was great, especially coming from these guys, because they've been right so much that once they started talking about humanoid robots, my ears pricked up and I was like, oh, wait a second. That guy, Tony Seba, is now talking about robots. And he's been right about X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Maybe I want to read this thing. So here are some of the things that Tony and Adam and Brad kind of had in that article. First of all, they wanted to give us some context about history. And I know I've done some of that as well already, but let me give you some of the real interesting factoids that they had. So between the years 1907 to 1922, we went from the horses providing humans with all miles traveled at 95%. So in other words, in the year 1907, 95+% of all miles traveled by humans was on horseback, either directly on horseback, horse-drawn carriage, any combination of things like that. And less than 5% was on some other mode of travel, be it ship. Obviously, ship would be a big one back then. And in 1907, there were already automobiles, but they weren't, obviously mass produced yet. But 95+% of all human miles traveled were on horseback. And by 1922, just 15 years later, after the mass production of the automobile, that collapsed to 20%. So we went from 95% of all miles traveled by humans being on horseback to within 15 years, only 20% of it being on horseback. And I can tell you, my grandparents were part of that 20% that was still on horseback in 1922. My grandfather was born in 1901 in a very, very rural part of Louisiana. And then shortly they moved over to East Texas. And yeah, he was, if I think about the year 1922, he would have been 21 years old. Just gotten back from World War One. Not that long. And yeah, he was still, everything they did in their, like on their farm and in their little hometown, everybody was on horseback. It wasn't, I think I remember him telling me that it was like the late 20s, maybe the mid to late 20s, when automobiles finally started like really ramping up on farms and areas around there in East Texas. But in 1922, my own grandparents would have been part of that 20% that were clinging on. So they were the fudsters of the day. No, I'm just kidding. They're not fudsters. It's just, that's, horses were still in 1922, if you lived in rural East Texas, you still used horses for everything. So that's a real interesting factoid. Here's the other interesting thing, and here's why that 20% finally gave up. So pretty much throughout history, the cost per mile of using a horse, if you bring it into today's dollars, obviously not back then, but in today's dollars, if you were to go back to the year 1900 and ask yourself, how much did it cost somebody per mile to have a horse in 1900? And it was $25 a mile. Now, somebody might look at that and go, well, holy heck. I mean, that's like 20, if I had to spend $25 a mile for my commute to work, that would be my entire paycheck. How did that work? Well, let's be blunt. Number one, people didn't commute to work back in the 1800s and, early 1900s and before. They worked on farms. So when we say miles traveled, that's generally on your own farm, right? So you're using a horse or mules to plow your field. You're going from one end of your farm to another, which might at most be, 50 to 100 acres. Because most farms in 1900 were not huge. They were 5 acre lots, 10 acre lots, 40 acre lots, 100 acre lots at most. If you went above 100 acres back then, you were a rancher. You were, a bigwig. You were doing business versus just self-sustenance. My grandparents were self-sustenance farmers. That's what they knew. All their family had, been farmers. Don't get me wrong. They sold but they weren't like, obviously, major, business people. So that $25 a mile, that they really didn't spend they didn't spend that, a huge part of their disposable income on transportation back then. It was just too prohibitive. So it wasn't like they were doing your 50-mile commute every day. In fact, they couldn't, because here's a factoid that, I've grown up around horses all my life, just being in Texas. But here's something I completely forgot about till I read it in here. This would have been just a well-known fact back then, but I had totally forgotten that basically, no matter how healthy a horse could not be ridden for more than 20 miles a day. If you tried to ride a horse more than 20 miles in a 24-hour period, you'd kill it. Like literally, you would kill it. So there were, people that, like the Pony Express, good example, they would have fresh horses along the way. You'd have those Pony Express stops. So it wasn't even a question of whether somebody back then could have had a 50-mile commute back and forth to work. It just didn't exist. You could only push a horse 20 miles a day. That was it. Once a horse went 20 miles, you were done. That was it. So you could decide how fast or how slow you wanted those 20 miles to be. but all a horse was going to give you was 20 miles, and then it needed to rest. So that's a, you know, an interesting point on the cost. So you went from $25 per mile for the cost of transportation. And so therefore, that's one of the reasons people never went further than 20 or 30 miles away from their homes for their entire lives, right? Is because you couldn't. I mean, it made no sense to, like, if you were going to go on a journey like that was going to be over hundreds and hundreds of miles, you basically had to have a lot of money. Because you're going to have to take care of that horse. And you were going to have to find ways to do that. That, you know, we'll have to go into the details on that, but, you know, just think about that. It was going to take a lot. So most people didn't. When the automobile came along, that took the price of humans traveling a mile down from $25 a mile to about $1.50 a mile. That's humongous. So is there any, like, does anybody scratch their head on why we went from 95% horses in 1907 to down to 20% by 1922? And then by the time you get to 1950, it's damn near 100% for automobiles, right? Well, there's your reason. We went from $25 a mile for travel. And again, don't go audit these numbers. I got these all, you know, off and I did my own, you know, I kind of looked through those numbers just to make sure they made sense. But once I looked at what you would have had to have done back in 1907 to take care of a horse, like all the things you would need to do, the price of those things, and then you inflate it up to today's dollars, I'm gonna be honest with you, $25 is a little low. I just don't think people spend it though. Like people just, basically you were house locked, you were landlocked, you never left your home, and that was probably part of the reason why. But then that price went down to $1.50 a mile. And that makes sense, right? Now, even like we would look at that and say, wow, $1.50, that's pretty expensive. You know, and when I say $1.50, I don't mean like Uber and Lyft. I'm talking about your personal ownership of a vehicle, right? All the things that go into it. So the upkeep of the vehicle, insurance, gas, you know, anything that goes into parking, anything that goes into maintaining a vehicle. That was about $1.50 in 1922 in today's dollars. Obviously not back then. It was probably like a dime back then. But when you inflate that to today's dollars, that's about $1.50. All right, we got a yellow. How long are we going to keep it? All right, good deal. Same thing. Man, these are some long yellows out here. Yeah, so then we think about today, well, how far have we gotten? So going from horse to the internal combustion engine vehicle was like almost a 20x improvement, right? $25 to $1.50. I can do the math there, but that's probably about 20x improvement. And so then you might ask, well, how well have we done since then? Well, I mean, all you got to do is go look at the IRS tables, right? What's the cost per mile? I think depending on where you live, it's anywhere as low as 65 cents a mile to as high as 75 cents to $1 a mile. I think if you live in Manhattan and you try to have a vehicle, or you live in San Francisco and want to have a vehicle, you're probably closer to $1 a mile, right? All in cost for owning a vehicle. Versus if you live in Lincoln, Nebraska, or where I live in Porter, Texas, or places, you know, it's probably more like 60 to 65 cents a mile for owning a vehicle. Well, that's a pretty big improvement. That's 3x improvement, right? 2 to 3x. But it's not the 25, the 20 to 25x improvement that happened just in 15 years. In a 15-year span, 1907 to 1922, there was anywhere from 20 to 25x improvement in the cost of transportation. So from 1922 to the year 2025, 100 years, We've only improved it 3x, right? So we haven't really had disruption in that 100-year period. And so what Tony Seba, let's make sure, where are we headed here? Let me put a pin in that for a second. I just want to see where we're going. All right, wants to get over to the right. Awesome. So we're going to get on 45 South now. There we go. So yeah, what Tony and Adam and Brad are saying, and sorry I keep looking because I just want to make sure I get the names right, is that humanoid robots are going to be that sort of disruption. That they are going to be like the disruption of the internal combustion engine coming on the scene and replacing the horse as the primary mode of transportation. And think about it. Think about how dramatically our country changed, the world changed, our lives changed, our culture changed because of the automobile. I mean, it's entirely different today in the year 2025 than it would have been in 1900. Everything. So they're saying, like, if you think about this, the adoption of the robot is going to be an S-curve. It's like this, and then it just ramps. And then after that ramp, it kind of keeps growing, but at a slower rate. But if you look at a lot of these S-curves, they also are not only disruptive, but they literally get rid of, annihilate, and eliminate whatever it is they're replacing. Not physically, but euphemistically. So, like, obviously horses exist today, and they're beautiful, and we love them. And I would say the horse is one of the most beautiful parts of American culture and a lot of other cultures, and we treasure them, right? But do we use them for transportation? No. And has the fact that we no longer have to use them for transportation totally revolutionized our society? Absolutely. And so the humanoid robot is going to do the exact same thing to human labor. It's going to be an S-curve that annihilates another curve, creating an X-curve. So if you think about an X like that, the S-curve of the humanoid robotics going this way is going to create a reverse S for human labor going that way. And it's going to be very similar. If you were to look at those two curves back in 1907 to 1922, it's identical to the probably the timeline as well, right, of when the automobile was first introduced. Well, probably a different, a similar type of trajectory. All right, let's put a pin in that for a second. We've turned into my brother-in-law's rehab facility. Let's see where FSD takes us. All right. Come around this way. All right. Where are you going to? All right, going to curve around, and it's going to drop us off directly in front. I'll bet you. Yep. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to drop a pin again. Let's just try it. In trip, navigate. So we're right there. Let me see if it's at all possible. Just try it. Come on, park us, baby, park us. It's not going to do it. It's just not going to park out here. So I am going to go ahead and just manually park. In fact, let me do this. Let me see if it'll pick up. All right, do that. Let's see if it'll pick up. And it does. All right. So at least we were able to auto park. But technically, I was not parking spot to parking spot, hands and feet free. Because the only way for me to activate, unless somebody tell me otherwise, that once it ends, FSD ends the transportation and drops you off right there, the only way for me to pull up a parking spot is to hit the brake real quick. Now, that's all I got to do is I got to touch the brake and then that parking spot comes up. But that's the only way I know of to do it. Let me know in the comments, any of you other Tesla FSD aficionados, let me know if there is a way that when FSD is done and it parks itself, it's done, kaput. Is there a way to pull up and use Autopark without touching the brake pedal? Let me know. All right. Well, we're at my brother-in-law's rehab facility. Like I said, want to go in there and drop some stuff off for him and visit him. But, you know, I wanted to start off this final part of the discussion on humanoid robots with Tony Seba's article. We're going to go through a few more things on the way back, but I thought those were some really good factoids. You know, if you really want to think about it historically, that 1907 to 1922 period is probably going to be pretty doggone close to what we're going to see with humanoid robots and human labor. The question is what do we consider to be our 1907? Does the fact that Tesla just put out job openings for 70 folks to start manufacturing these things, and they've said they're going to get 10,000 of them manufactured and deployed internally within their own factory in Fremont and Austin, is that our 1907? Or have we still not gotten to 1907 yet? I don't know. In my mind, I still think we're like at 1905 right now, right? Because if you think about 1905, the automobile existed in 1905, right? But it wasn't really being used for anything useful yet, I believe, at that point. So yeah, that's kind of the good question, was when does that clock start ticking? But don't get it twisted. That clock, there is a clock that's already ticking because these things already exist. They just need to be mass manufactured. That's what those job openings are for, are not to create it. It's created. It exists. It's to mass manufacture them. So maybe that clock has started. Maybe our 1907 is 2025. Yeah. I'm going to treat it like our 1907 is 2025. So anyway, gonna go see my brother-in-law, and I'll be back out here in a little while, and we will continue to go through some of these really interesting things that at least I think they're interesting about humanoid robotics, where we're going, and then we will end it and be done with it, stick a fork in it until something new comes up with robotics, obviously, and move on to other things that I know y'all want to talk about. Like I said, I've got EV batteries waiting in the wings as well as some other things. All right, everybody, I will see y'all in a little bit. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody, JC here. About 5:45 in the evening here in the Woodlands. Just got done visiting with my brother-in-law at his rehab facility here. He's good to go, so it's time to get back on the road and head home. I've already got my home into the Tesla navigation, so all I need to do is touch the little blue button and we'll be on our way. Let's do it. All right. Pulling out of the parking lot. Make a right turn here up towards the feeder. Got a speed bump. See how we do with that. Good deal. We slow way down for that speed bump, but it is a big speed bump. Good job. All right, we're going to come up here to the feeder of Interstate 45, I-45 southbound. So we're going to have to creep up a little bit. We've got a lot of oncoming traffic. I mean, a lot. So we may be here for a little bit. Let's just see. Yeah, let me see. Maybe. No. I don't know. Is there a gap right? Nope. Nope, nothing yet. Man, it is just, wow. It is a lot. And we've got a car directly behind us. So I definitely don't want to tally too much. There we go, right here. Let's go. Let's see how we... Awesome. So we did have a car about 30 yards behind us, but there was a gap. We took it confidently. Love it. Yeah, I will tell you, version 13 has essentially gotten rid of... I can't remember the last time I had to do a non-critical intervention to take a right turn onto a feeder road here in Houston. And I had to do that a number of times on almost all the time on version 11, because on version 11 you had to just have the biggest, almost a mile gap for it to be comfortable. On version 12 it got a lot better because that's when they went to the neural net, but it was still pretty hesitant. On version 13 it has just been fantastic, very human-like in identifying opportunities, gaps, and getting out there. The only thing right now that version 13, at least version 13.2.2, which I'm still on right now, that I've noticed that it doesn't do very human-like, is it just disregard. If you have a blinker on, if it's trying to either turn onto a road or turn right, either way, and it sees an oncoming vehicle, and that oncoming vehicle has their blinker on to turn where you're at, so a lot of humans might see that they're actually slowing down and they are in fact going to take that turn. Humans might go ahead and pull out, and FSD just does not do that. So it does not trust humans and their blinkers yet. And quite frankly, I'm not sure I know exactly how I feel about that, because on one hand, we want it to be as human-like as possible. In most cases, we want it to be as human-like as possible. But on the same token, I know humans aren't that great with their blinkers. They leave them on. And they forget, they have their stereos blaring and they forgot they had their blinker on. And, you know, it's almost like you have to have the ability, and it should, software should be able to do this, is not just assess the blinker, but is that vehicle slowing down relative to where it was, say, 100 or 200 yards before? So, until it has that ability, I'm actually okay with it waiting for those cars to turn in. And if that involves me getting a honk from somebody behind me, I'm okay, because I don't even think I'm going to intervene on something like that, because, like I said, you shouldn't really trust humans in their blinkers all the time in that situation. All right. So, looks like we're going to be in some evening rush hour traffic. That's okay. All right. Got a Chevy Tahoe getting across. We adjusted that really well. We're going by the Woodlands Mall to our right. Wonderful mall. I think we're going to be on this feeder for quite a while. I don't think we're getting up on 45 right here. All right. So yeah, when we pulled into, yeah, we're not. Let me just put a pin in that before I even start. Yes, we are going by it. So we're going to stay on the 45 feeder, which kind of makes sense when I look at 45 right now. Like I said, it is 5:45 in the evening, so we've got the evening rush. But yeah, I'll pick back up now where I was when we pulled into my brother-in-law's rehab facility. We were talking about humanoid robots and Tony Seba's article on humanoid robots from 9 months, 6-9 months, maybe a year ago, that I just really found fascinating. And so when I try to close out a discussion on humanoid robots, I would really be remiss not to parlay that into, a discussion of what Tony and Adam Dunn and Brad Libby said about it. But yeah, so they had several insights about humanoid robots. Obviously with the preface that they're already here. Their prototypes are being made as we speak. So it's not like this is not pie in the sky, Star Wars. This is real stuff. They exist. They're just not at a point yet where they're doing tons of useful work in a utilitarian way in an actual industrial environment. That day hasn't come, as at least that I know of, but it's close. In fact, it's this year. And so let me go through some of those insights that Tony Seba had. Number one, that robot labor is inevitable. And what does he mean by robot labor being inevitable? Well, what that means is that the cost curve that we're going to experience with robot labor is going to be something we haven't seen in a long, long time, where the cost of a unit of work comes down so significantly that it just becomes inevitable, right? That the Industrial Revolution, the cost of doing certain things came down so significantly that it just became inevitable that we were going to move from the farms and move to the factories and the textiles and steel working plants and coal mines. And it was just inevitable that was going to happen. Where your morals are on that, if we feel like we'd have been better to stay as an agrarian society or not, that is a moral and ethical question. But whether that was going to happen or not is mute. It was going to happen because the cost of doing things came down so dramatically. So now let's look at robotics and what that's going to do. So it's going to bring the cost of labor down just dramatically. So if we think about the early days, all right, it looks like we are getting up on I-45 South now. Look at the early days of robotics. I mean, they're going to get lucky in these first couple of years if humanoid robots on a human equivalent unit of labor, one human doing certain tasks, a job, which is a combination, a responsibility of a bunch of different tasks. If it can even come, it's not going to come close to that, right? So it may cost the entity that's employing that humanoid robot, it's going to cost them maybe 10 to 15 bucks an hour for that labor. And that may sound like, well, hell, 10 to 15 bucks an hour, that's pretty good. But yeah, but still, that's not transformative. If you're having a humanoid robot doing a job, or I should say task, doing a task for you, or a series of tasks, and their equivalent cost for you is 15 bucks an hour, that's great, but it's not transformative, right? But what's going to happen is by the end of this decade, that 10 to 15 bucks an hour, that's going to come down to $1 an hour. And within 5 or 10 years after that, it's going to come down to $0.10 an hour. And so when you go back to that time frame we were talking about, that 1907 to 1922, if humanoid robots in 1907 cost $15 an hour, and by 1922 they cost 10 cents an hour, well, what do we think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen in that scenario? You're going to use as many humanoid robots as you possibly can. It's just going to be inevitable. There's literally going to be no economic argument that you can make for not using humanoid robotics. And then even if we get into a moral or ethical question about it, well, there's 8 billion people on the planet and 170 different countries, and we represent 5 to 10% of that. So we can make the decision not to do that, but we can't tell the other 95% of the world, and in particular, one place on Earth, China, we can't tell them to stop, and they're going to continue. They are going hard in the paint on robotics, as I already mentioned. And so it's going to happen. So we either join the race and help it and lead it, or it just happens to us. So if the Chinese all of a sudden 15 years from now are producing things at 10 cents an hour, and we're still trying to produce things at 20 to 25 bucks an hour, well, what's going to happen? Right? That doesn't take a math degree or an economics degree to know what that's going to do to us. So again, all that comes to say it's inevitable. Like, it is the labor cost. First of all, it's going to happen, and then the labor, the fact that humanoid robots are going to do meaningful labor, and it's going to cost less, is just inevitable. The second insight they had, and this is kind of something we touched on a little bit before, but because of this inevitability of robot labor and the cost curve coming down so dramatically, it's going to create entirely new labor systems. I mean, entirely new. So here's some, I'd say these are really good. I won't even call them analogies. It's just true historical context of where we were at then, and to equate it to today. So electricity wasn't just new whale oil, right? It brought on an entirely different system. Internal combustion engine wasn't just a new horse. It entirely changed our landscape, our culture, everything about us changed because of electricity and internal combustion engine cars. You know, farming, let's go back even further. You know, archaeologists and historians say we basically started farming about 10,000 years ago. Well, farming wasn't just a more efficient way to do hunting and gathering, right? No, farming changed who we were. And some folks might even argue that going from being primarily hunters and gatherers to primarily farmers changed our DNA, changed our everything about us. Like what a human being, what a Homo sapien looks like today compared to what a Homo sapien would have looked like 50,000 years ago are night and day. I mean, granted, biologically we're, almost identical, but I'm pretty sure that if you look at a human body today compared to somebody 50,000 years ago, we're probably about a foot taller. Let's just be blunt. I highly doubt there was a bunch of 6'3" people walking around 50,000 years ago. Now that being said, the bad part of it is, there also were those, 4'10" and 5 foot people walking around back then, probably had six pack abs. And if you have 6-pack abs today, you're an anomaly. But I say all that to say that, farming didn't just become an efficient way of doing hunting and gathering. It changed everything. And then finally, to bring it even closer to today, the internet. The internet wasn't a faster way to send mail, right? The internet was an entirely different process, system, landscape. So all of these things, all four of those things, didn't just make us more efficient. It entirely changed who we were. It changed our systems. It changed our processes. It changed our infrastructure. It changed everything about who we were. It changed the meaning of who we were. Like, I'm probably pretty sure that a hunter and gatherer, the exact same biological makeup as us today, 100%, same biology, of 50 to 70,000 years ago, their meaning, that whatever it was they thought their meaning in life was, is completely different than what we think of meaning today. And let's just keep going forward. I'm pretty sure that the people that predate us 200 years ago, just 200 years ago, who didn't have electricity and didn't have the internal combustion engine and didn't have the internet or any of those things, the meaning of life to them was completely different than what the meaning of life is to us today. And let's just even be more recent. The meaning of life to somebody in 1950 was a lot different than the meaning of life today because of the internet. The internet has created so many new ways to do work, so many different jobs, so many different things that we do, that what we fill our day up with today, 99% of it we weren't doing in 1950. And so quite by default, our meaning, what we want to get out of life, is completely different. I say all that to say the exact same thing is going to happen with humanoid robots doing the vast majority, if not all, of human labor. Taking us out of the labor equation it is going to give us all sorts of new systems, processes, infrastructure, and quite frankly, we're going to have to find a new meaning. And I hate to tell you this, I have no clue what that is. Tony Seba doesn't know what that is. Nobody, if anybody tells you they know what human beings 20 or 30 years from now, or 50 years from now, are going to consider what's the meaning of life, it's going to be completely different for them than it is for us today, and we have no clue. Just like the individual on a farm in 1825 could have never in a million years guessed what the meaning of life of their great-great-great-great-grandchild, you, is today in 2025. Your great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather or grandmother could have had no inkling of what your life would be like today. And their meaning, what they thought the meaning of life was, could not be diametrically more different than what yours is probably today. And so we're going to need to find that. Humanity is going to need to figure out what that is. Do we know what that is right now? Absolutely not. But neither did those generations, and that didn't stop them. So just because somebody in the 1800s had no idea what our life and our meaning was going to be like 200, 150 years after them, it didn't stop them from tinkering with electricity. It didn't stop them from tinkering on those steam engines. It didn't stop them from trying to push forward with automobiles and airplanes, right? So it shouldn't stop us from continuing to go forward with artificial intelligence. Our artificial intelligence is their steam engine. It's their internal combustion engine, right? It's all of those things for them. It's their electricity, right? So we wouldn't go back and say, no, you were wrong. You should have stayed with whale oil. You should have stayed on the farm. No, we're happy they did that because it gave us the life we have today. Had they not pushed forward on all those things, we wouldn't have the lives we enjoy today. And so we should not stop pushing forward and pushing the envelope so that our great great, 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 great grandchildren can look back on us and say, thank you for pushing forward, right? They're going to have no clue why we did, well, I should say they won't have, but we'll have no clue. We will have no clue about what's going to make them tick 150 years from now. But we don't need to. We just need to do what all human beings, all Homo sapiens, and all Homo sapien predecessors have done for millions of years. And that is, go see what's outside the cave. Don't stay in the cave. We're going to die in the cave. Somebody go see what's outside that cave. So that was kind of the second insight. The third insight, and I kind of hit on this a little bit, is that the disruption initially is going to be about task. Not job, but task. So let me explain that a little bit. Excuse me. So if you think about it, all of us have jobs. We don't have tasks, we have jobs. Well, y'all do, or some of y'all do. I don't anymore. I'm retired. But but still, let's just put, in my example, you know, I do things related to Tesla and to AI and to, you know, autonomy, vehicle autonomy, and now talking about humanoid robots. So that's kind of my meaning right now, right? Is to continue, in my little way, I sit in a Tesla and I have two GoPros, one looking that way and one looking at me. And that's kind of the meaning I've found in my life right now. And so that's my job, right? My job is to do, is what I'm doing right now, is to kind of be a steward. I want to be a steward of this stuff. But your job may be different. Your job may be you work at a construction site. Your job may be you are the AR supervisor for, you know, ConocoPhillips, or you're the fixed asset manager for Schlumberger, or you are a software engineer at BMC or something. You know, whatever that is, you could be a teacher, right? One of the greatest professions on earth. You teach elementary school, or you're a cop, you're a police officer, or you're a security guard. Whatever it is, you have a job. That job is not a task. That job basically is you entering into a contractual obligation with an entity to have responsibility for a bunch of series of tasks. And in a lot of cases, you won't even know what those tasks are. There will be a baseline of tasks that will be your responsibility, but there will be plenty of other tasks that come along that you will be responsible for. And so that's your job. So that, and when you think about those jobs, the jobs we have, they all have some varying degree of education that's needed, training that's needed, and in a lot of cases, experience that's needed. So you have to bring a combination of experience, training, and education in order for that entity to give you the ability to have responsibility over all those tasks. So initially, these humanoid robots are not going to have jobs. They are going to be responsible for tasks. So that's probably a good way to look at this right now, is that's why humanoid robots are not initially going to be job killers. And when I say job killers, I mean they're not initially going to take human beings out of the labor market in huge numbers immediately. They're just not. In fact, what Tony Seba says is that in the first 5 to 10 years of really ramping up humanoid robots, in truth, what it's going to do is it may even on the early part add to the amount of humans in the equation, because there are going to need to be quite a few humans that know how to interact with humanoid robots, that know how to bring humanoid robots into the fold in order for them to handle certain tasks. So there may actually be a bump in the need for humans in this equation. But make no mistake about it, these humanoid robots aren't necessarily going to be handling jobs. They are going to be handling tasks, right? And so the proper unit of measure to think about humanoid robotics in the future, for right now, at least until we get to a level of demarcation where humanoid robots take on some sort of sentience, that's for another day. We're not there yet. We're not even close to that. But until the AI gets to that point, they are going to be handling tasks, and that's going to be for a good little while. So the proper unit of measure is to think about task. So one of the things that that companies are gonna start doing is they are going to be breaking jobs down into tasks. And so they're going to be looking at those tasks and saying, okay, this job responsibility that somebody has, what are their day-to-day tasks? And what of those tasks can be taken care of by humanoid robotics instead of this human labor? And slowly but surely, and I will say maybe not slowly, in some cases pretty quickly, those tasks are going to be put on humanoid robotics. And let me tell you this way, companies are going to have to do this. So it's not going to be a question of if or should. It's going to be half, because if companies don't start doing this, once these humanoid robots enter the picture, they're going to be toast. So if they continue to use human labor for 100% of their task, they're going to be toast. They're just not going to be competitive. The companies that start the process of breaking down human labor jobs, not tasks, but jobs, these combination of these responsibility of several tasks, if they don't start breaking it down quantitatively into different tasks and trying to see where humanoid robotics can fit in there, in the mid to long term, they're going to be toast. And so you're going to see a lot of that. And so what you're going to start seeing is unit economics are going to start shifting towards task per hour per dollar. And if your company, or if you or anybody doesn't start looking at things from a vantage point of task per hour per dollar and measuring themselves on that KPI, they're wrong. They're just going to be flat out wrong. So that's going to be a new metric. You heard it here first. Task per hour per dollar. And they're going to equate that. And I'm going to tell you, right now, the analysts, they either don't even know about humanoid robotics or they're dismissing it. They just don't know enough about it, right? Except for a handful. But once this hits them in the face, and the analysts that are covering companies right now are all fired or are put to and they bring in brand new analysts who actually understand this stuff, and that is going to happen, is once those new analysts come in and they understand this, that is going to be one of the KPIs that they are. So make no mistake about it. Will EBITDA still be there? Obviously. Revenue growth, earnings growth, all of that's going to be there. But a brand new KPI is going to be some sort of derivation of task per hour per dollar. All products and services are going to get cheaper. I mean, obviously, if labor gets cheaper, products and services are going to get cheaper. It just makes sense, right? Because human labor is an input to everything. I don't care what it is. Human labor, the act of a human doing something, thinking about something, researching something, whatever it is, human labor goes into that. As the cost of that comes down, all products and services are going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And as they get cheaper, they're also going to get better. Because one thing about, we're doing a U-turn here. Okay. Getting rerouted. That's fine. Let's see how we do on this U-turn. Beautiful U-turn. That was a beautiful U-turn. I've never seen a U-turn like that. I only do the best U-turns. Everybody says my U-turns are the best. They're beautiful. Beautiful U-turn. All right. Anyway, so they're all going to get better. I think y'all know who I said. Let me know in the comments, how was my my impersonation there. So, and with that, you got to think products and services are going to get better as costs go down, because think about humanoid robot labor. There's no limits to the skill. There's no limits to their attention to detail. They don't get sick. They don't get drunk. They don't show up to work late. They're on time all the time. And their endurance is off the charts, right? They, when the clock starts ticking 3:30, 4 o'clock, 4:30, they're not yawning. They're not, tired. They don't have to go pick up the kids, right? They none of that factors in whatsoever. So the more and more of that gets factored in, the better and better they get. The services are just good, and the products are just going to be better. So that's another. So costs are going to come down. The quality is going to get better. So finally, then what's the next step? So all of that's going to happen. Then ultimately, we're going to get to a point where nations are going to look internally at themselves and say, well, if we don't go hard in the paint on this as a nation, this is kind of against our national interest not to, right? Infrastructure development, right? So when we think about all things going into roads, trains, buildings, all our infrastructure, everything that goes along with that. Well, humanoid robotics, if one country is deploying humanoid robotics to help with that and you're not, you're going to get way behind. And so citizens are going to want to move to the countries where they've used humanoid robots to help with their infrastructure. And those countries that pushed against it, your citizens are going to leave, because they're going to see the quality of life in those other countries continue to improve, and they're going to walk with their feet. That's what immigration is, right? So the only way that's not going to happen is for you to put up a wall. That's happened, unfortunately. In fact, we have a country on earth today that has a wall up on their citizens, unfortunately. But we don't have to go that far back in history to see that countries have put up walls to keep their citizens from voting with their feet, right? So we've got that. Plus, nations are just going to become more self-sufficient with humanoid robotics. No longer are they going to need to trade as much with each other, right? And so a lot of countries are dependent on other countries trading with them in order to bring their quality of life up. And so if all of a sudden you've got a ton of countries that no longer have to do a lot of trade, that they can increase their quality of life through humanoid robotics and no longer have to trade with you, they're going to leave you in the dust. Finally, well, not finally, but you hate to bring it up, but it's just as a matter of fact. Countries that go hard in the paint on robots are probably going to go hard in the paint on national defense with robots. So that by itself is going to force us, from a national interest standpoint, to also go hard in the paint on humanoid robots. And then finally, what we could do with robotics from the standpoint of alleviation of poverty, homelessness, hunger, climate problems, all of those things that we bemoan ourselves about today. If we had 10 million, 100 million, a billion humanoid robots at 10 cents an hour being able to ramp us up on all these things, those things we can eradicate. So that's going to become part of national interest. And so the countries that resist it, your citizens are basically going to vote with their feet and leave you. So let's not do that. Another insight that I find really, really interesting is something that's going to be upended by robotics is this age-old complement of capital and labor. So no matter where you live on Earth today, basically every system and structure we live under basically has a philosophy of labor and capital and the relationship between labor and capital. If you're a pure socialist / communist, you have a view of labor versus capital. If you're a pure anarcho-capitalist, you also have a view of labor versus capital. You both come from a completely antithetical perspective on that relationship between labor and capital, but you both believe in that theory. Well, guess what's about to happen? Both of you, both you, the socialist, communist, Marxist, and you, the pure capitalist, laissez-faire, blah, blah, Adam Smith, or even the anarchist capitalist, guess what's about to happen to both of y'all? Y'all are all about to get blown out of the water. You are no longer going to exist. Your philosophies are going to be toast. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. We're going to have to rethink everything, right? So socialism, communism, Marxism, go back to the late 1700s, early 1800s. Did much of that exist? Not really. Go back to late 1700s, early 1800s. Did our view of capitalism exist? Not really. You know what existed? Agrarianism, right? All of the philosophies of economics and politics that we live under today are all entirely a 200-year or less construction. They did not exist 200 plus years ago to the degree that we think about it today. Marxism. I mean, that guy what did he live? He was like, what, in the 1840s, 1850s, 1860s? So you're not even talking 200 years. Adam Smith, like I said, about, a little bit over 200 years ago, but nobody, we were still agrarian. We considered his thoughts to be revolutionary. So you're talking about two completely antithetical type of philosophies that didn't exist in the real world 200 years ago. Well, now everybody lives under those systems in one form or fashion. Well, guess what, people? Guess what humanoid robots at 10 cents an hour and billions of them does to that? I'll put you like this. Fox News and MSNBC do not exist in that world. All right, we're getting across the railroad intersection, and I'll tell you what, I would not bemoan either of those institutions going the way of the dodo bird. And let me just be blunt. I am a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist. So I'm not sitting here trying to crap on Marxism / socialism / communism, right? And at the same time, I'm not trying to sit here like, well, my team's going to win. Because guess what? As a dyed-in-the-wool, pure breed capital, I am a capitalist through and through. And in fact, if you were to ask me what sort of capitalism, I'm fairly a supply side capitalist. Well, guess what? My side's going to lose, and it's going to lose real bad, real bad. All of us we're going to be gone. That philosophy is going to be considered like agrarianism, like the way we look back on agrarianism of the 16 and 1700s, or the way we look back on feudalism of the 14 and 1500s or the 1300s. The way we look back on those systems is the way human beings are going to look back on capitalism versus socialism of today. They're just going to be gone. They're no longer going to exist. All of the factors of economics that we think about today, elasticity, supply versus demand, toast, gone, sayonara, arrivederci, whatever. I'm running out of bye-bye. That's Chinese, I think. I'm running out of languages to adios, amigos. There. What's another language I could say bye with? Arrivederci. How do you say bye in German? Since that's Marx. Somebody tell me in the comments how you say bye in German, because that's what Karl Marx spoke. So I need to say bye-bye to socialism. But at the same time, I want to say bye-bye to Adam Smith's capitalism. But he spoke English, so I'm already saying that in my mother tongue. So I don't want to choose sides here. All of that, gone, bye-bye. So we are going to have to rethink an entirely new system. But going back to my comment before, do we know what that system's going to be? I have no clue. Zero. None. Because none of this is going to be demand driven, or at a certain point it won't even be supply driven. It's just going to exist. And so the whole labor versus capital thing is gone. There will no longer be a tug of war between labor and capital, because labor and capital will be one and the same. What do you do in a world where labor is capital and capital is labor? Right? What do you argue over then? We're gonna argue over something, because we're Homo sapiens, we're human beings, but it's gonna be something completely different. And I'm telling you, this is just going to slap some people upside the head in a way that they're just not gonna know what to do with it. Like all of the politics that we argue about today on either side is just gonna be toast. It is literally going to be toast. And the people who understand that and try to get in front of that and think in different ways, regardless of how you're viewed today, are going to win. I'm going to say that again. The folks that know this is going to happen and are getting in front of it and doing the things for humanity, and specifically here in the United States, are doing things for our country to set us up to succeed in a world like that 20 years from now, those are the people that are going to dictate which direction we go. I want to be part of that group. I don't want to be part of the group pushing against it. I don't want to be part of the group arguing against it, because those people, they're going to lose regardless. So the longer you do this, the longer you just sit there and wish cast that this never happens, it's just not going to be good. All right, let's see what we do. Are we going to try to park? Are we going to try to park? We are going to try to park. Even with that angle right there. Awesome. Awesome. So let me look at my list. So again, there was no other car here, so that helped. But that was a tough angle with my niece's car there. So it's definitely not the angle. And it's not that, it's having the car here. I'm going to make sure nobody in my family except for me is able to park on the drive. I'm just kidding, obviously. So yeah, we're going to have to rethink the basic social contract. We're going to have to be radical about what we think about what our society is going to look like. Yeah. So human beings in the future, we're going to have to focus on entirely new things, a different way of thinking about things. You know, when Gutenberg's printing press came along, that brought along the Renaissance, right? When the Greeks took up the alphabet, when they adapted the Phoenician alphabet, what did that bring? It brought city-states. It brought philosophy. Now they had time to think about philosophy. It brought democracy, thoughts about democracy. I'm going to turn on the lights here just so I make sure that I get everything off my list. And then the Industrial Revolution. Our lives today are directly impacted by people going hard in the paint on the Industrial Revolution. Regardless of what you think about that, morally or ethically, everything we enjoy today is because 200 plus years ago, our ancestors decided to go hard in the paint on Industrial Revolution. We get to fly in airplanes today. We get to drive in cars today. We live in houses that don't burn down today. We have power at night today because our ancestors did that. So I'm thankful for that. And people are going to look back 200 years from now on us and be thankful we went hard in the paint on AI. But they're just going to have to think of something entirely different. So what are my views on what those things, what are we going to do in the meantime? That could be UBI, universal basic income. Could be a tax on autonomy, a tax on companies that deploy AI in their businesses. I know Elon even brought that up. Elon has mentioned at times we may need to have some sort of UBI across it. We may need to have some sort of tax on autonomy that then goes into a sovereign wealth fund that each country has, that we then deploy into other things for folks to. We may have data as revenue. So, the data that you generate in this new world, you get paid for that data. And again, I mentioned sovereign funds. We may have to have countries will create sovereign wealth funds that will then tax the autonomy that these companies create. And then that goes into redistribution. Hey, don't sit here and think that that's outlandish or that's radical. Humanoid robots working for 10 cents an hour is radical. I mean, how are you going to compete in that world? You're not. And you don't want to compete. Like, do you want to work for 9 cents an hour? Of course you don't. You're just not going to want to do that in that world. So we're going to have to get radical. And it probably won't be us. It'll probably be our kids and our grandkids. So we don't have to sit here and think radically for them. Like, thank God it wasn't up to my great grandfather in 1825 to figure out how planes were supposed to work. Thank God, because I guarantee you he would have been wrong. He didn't have to think about it. Somebody came along and thought about it afterwards. And there will be people that come after us that think about it. All we need to do is keep pushing forward. So what do I think some of these future human endeavors are going to be? I think they're going to be creative. I think we're going to go to a world where creative endeavors take on an even more special part. So people talk about AI is going to get rid of folks that are creative. I don't. I think it's going to amplify that. I think we're going to use artificial intelligence and even become more creative. So the folks that are going to get really rewarded in this new world are going to be folks who can adapt to AI and push it in even more creative ways. I think if you're creative, you are going to be highly regarded in this new world. Hobbies, games, and sports. I think those are going to take on even more importance in this new world. Experiences and learning. I think that's going to be treasured in this new environment. And for me personally, and I've got my t-shirt on, Mars Army, interplanetary exploration. For me, what I would love to see is that this gives us the ability where we live in a world with billions of humanoid robots working for 10 cents an hour or less a day on all human tasks and everything we need to do. That is going to free us up to go hard in the paint on interplanetary exploration, the moon and Mars. But beyond that, let's go beyond that. Like, to me, I'm sitting here in 1825 and I would be looking at it going like, wow, that'll be great when we can go from Kansas City to St. Louis on a plane. No, I want to go across the Atlantic on a plane. I want to circumnavigate the world on a plane. Let's go beyond Mars. Let's go outside our solar system. Let's do it all. Let's get out there. And so I think personally, the only way we're able to even do that, to get beyond Mars, and explore even beyond that, is we're going to need humanoid robotics to do it. And so that's why, one of the reasons I'm really excited about it. So that's my personal thing is, hey, let's go hard in the paint on that as a society. Let's like, we got humanoid robotics doing all the tasks. Well, then humans, let's go forth into the stratosphere. Like Hulk Hogan says, we're going to go beyond. We're going to go to the stratosphere. Anyway, all right. Sorry, bad analogy. But the truth is, we just don't really have any idea. But we don't have to have an idea. We don't. Let's just keep going forward. So what should me, you, everybody? My final thought, what should we be focused on? We should be focused on gaining as much knowledge as you possibly can, no matter what. I'm not a software engineer. I'm not an engineer of any sort. I'm a Marine veteran, retired accountant, driving around in a car with 2 GoPros in his face down by the river. But even me, I am going hard in the paint on gaining as much knowledge as I possibly can about artificial intelligence, AGI, robotics, all of it. I'm going hard in the paint on it. Gain as much knowledge as you can. And for you personally, then take that knowledge and see, how can I help adapt humanoid robotics into my world? What task can I help my company? What task can I help my society, my community, whatever it is? How can I help push this? And yeah, I know some of you may be on, what are you talking about, JC? You're telling me, how can I help a robot take my job? Yes. That is what I'm asking you to do. I am asking you to help you as a fellow human. If we can all find a way to help robots take over our day jobs, our grandkids and great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids and great-great-great-great-great-grandkids are going to love us for it. They are. I totally look at this differently than what you're going to hear from a lot of folks out there. That's my opinion. It's my opinion. And I can lose subscribers over this, and it's okay. I'm fine with that, because I'm not out here trying to get subscribers and followers. I am passionate about this. I feel like I am in one of the greatest periods of time in human history right now. We are at this precipice where this is the late 1700s, early 1800s. We are about to enter the Industrial Revolution. We are in the 14 and 1500s. We are about to enter the Renaissance. And we are so lucky. Imagine that you're one of those individuals that's right there at the precipice of the Renaissance. You're one of those individuals that's there in the 3rd or 4th century BC in Greece. And you're like pushing philosophy. You're listening to Aristotle. And you're about, like, my God, these ideas, this dude Aristotle, he's going to get killed. Right? Shut up, Aristotle. Like, don't talk about that stuff, right? But no, I'm like, no, keep talking, Aristotle. That's cool, dude. Keep talking about that shit, man. Let's go. Let's go. Let's LFG. Come on, Aristotle. Let's go, Socrates. Kick it, dude. That's where we're at right now. But for us, it's AI and robotics. There were people that fought against Aristotle and Socrates. There were people that wanted them dead. There were people that wanted Galileo dead. You know, there were people that didn't want the Renaissance to happen. There were people that didn't want the Industrial Revolution to happen. But history stomped on them. And they're in the ash heap of history. I don't want to be that. I want to help push this thing along. So, yeah. Get as much knowledge as you can and try to adapt it into your life, into your current work, your own vocation. If you're a teacher, how can a humanoid robot help you? Not take your job yet, but how can a humanoid robot be a teacher's assistant? How can it help you with special education? If you're a nurse, how can it help you with cleaning your patients? How could it help you with administering meds? How could it help you? If you're a nursing home worker, wouldn't it be nice if instead of you having to do everything in that nursing home, what if those old folks had a humanoid robot to sit next to and watch Matlock and Murder, She Wrote with, right? Oh, I'd even do it. But anyway, yeah, a humanoid robot whose specific task is watching Matlock and making very pithy and witty statements to their human companion about Matlock, about that particular episode of Matlock or that particular episode of Murder, She Wrote, right? Yeah. So that's it. That's where I want to end it. Continue to learn, but not just learn, incorporate it. Really take it on. Because I think the more we take it on, the better it's going to be for all of us. And we're going to find meaning. Don't worry about that. When the folks that come 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, don't worry about them. They're going to figure it out. They're going to find meaning. We did. Our ancestors did. Over and over and over and over again. They just did. When Gutenberg's printing press came along, they found a way to incorporate it. Did it take some manual jobs back then? Yeah, it did. But did it also create the Renaissance? Hell yeah, brother. When the Industrial Revolution came along, was it some painful for a lot of folks? Yeah. But it also gave us the life that we all live today. All of it. If you're watching this video, you are living the life of what the Industrial Revolution gave you. Yeah. So let's just go hard in the paint on it. So that's really the last thing when I shut all this down, is like, get as much knowledge as you possibly can. You're not going to get the same sort of knowledge as somebody who's a software engineer or an electrical engineer or a mechanical engineer or a scientist. Obviously, those guys are going to be at the end, at the tiny, tiny tip. But you know what? Not everybody, go back and read the history books. Not everybody who's in the history books for the Renaissance or the Industrial Revolution or, bringing philosophy and democracy into vogue. Not all those people were scientists and engineers. They weren't. A lot of those people in those history books were regular, normal citizens like us, and they did their own little part. And they found a way to even amplify it further than those people did. So that would be the last thing I want to say before I close this out, is I don't want you to be scared of humanoid robots. I want you to be excited about it. Like when I heard today that there's 70 job openings for Optimus humanoid robots, that it just got released today, game on, LFG. I was excited. I felt excited about it. And in a way, I heard this said on a Spaces today on X, are those 70 employees basically going to manufacture something that will put them out of a job one day? Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But you know what? It's going to create a world that they'll go into that's even better. And they'll want to do work that's even better. Because you know what? The job of manufacturing a humanoid robot 10 years from now is going to pay less than $1 an hour. It just is. It's not even going to pay, because that's what it's going to cost. Because it's going to be humanoid robots making humanoid robots. So the folks that are going to get hired at very good wages today to build those robots, 10 years from now, that job's going to be about $1 an hour. So they're not going to want to do that. But they're going to be doing things that are vastly better than what we could even imagine today. And the things that our grandkids and great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids are going to be able to do 100 years from now, man, we can't even imagine how wonderful it's going to be. We can't even imagine. But the only thing we can control is that we can keep pushing forward and do it for them. All right. Well, that's it. That's where I'm ending it. And I'm done with Optimus humanoid robot. I'm done with the Q4 earnings release. And now we can move on to other things. And I'll start the next time we do this little podcast drive. I'll get back on my EV battery stuff. But I really did want to hit this head on. Because it's important, because it's the most transformational thing going on today. So I wanted to give it time. I didn't want to just try to hit it in one drive. I wanted to take the time necessary for it. And I think I did. So if any of y'all have any questions, comments, responses, please hit me up in the comments on YouTube as well as X. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you have any questions. And if anything, as things new come up, I'll broach those as well. But, yeah. So the last thing I'm going to say is, I love each and every one of you. I do. So that's why I do this. That's why I talk about this. I'm retired. I ain't got to do anything. I could go sit in Florida on a beach and sip pina coladas and, no, never mind. I was going to bring my wife into it, but no, I'm going to leave that out of it. Got to keep this PG, for monetization. Just kidding. But yeah, I do this because I love this. I'm passionate about this. And I want to spread that passion to all of y'all. I want everybody that hears this to come along with it and be rewarded by it and enjoy it. So let's do it. All right. I love each and every one of you. And I'll talk to all of y'all again soon. Bye-bye.